What are some of the best and worst ways for government leaders and corporate executives to be seen and heard during a crisis? I'm Edward Segal, the author of the best selling and award winning book, Crisis Ahead: 101 Ways to Prepare for and Bounce Back from Disasters, Scandals, and Other Emergencies. I'm also a leadership strategy senior contributor for Forbes.com, where I cover late breaking and crisis related news, topics, and issues. A lot can certainly be at stake for how well or poorly federal and company officials come across to the public during a crisis. The stakes can include their credibility, reputation, and even their careers. My guest today is Kirk Hazlett, an adjunct professor of communication at the University of Tampa. He'll share his observations and recommendations on how well or poorly various officials have conducted themselves during crisis situations and found themselves in the harsh glare of the public spotlight. Welcome to Crisis Ahead, Kirk. I'm glad you could be with me today.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here and looking forward to having a chat about all things management and crisis, I guess.
Definitely. Tell me, why do you think it's so important that government officials or corporate executives are seen and heard during a crisis?
Very simply, having lived through crises as a public relations manager, is the public wants to hear from the leader. I have had this conversation in the past with reporters. They're saying, Kirk, you're paid to say that. I need to hear from your leader. This is the person who's, quote, driving the bus. So, and the public, that's where the credibility lies, is with the person up at the top. So you hit a hot button for me on that one.
Well, there's certainly no lack of examples of the best and unfortunately the worst ways federal and company executives have been visible and vocal when their organizations have been impacted by a crisis. Let's take a look, though, at some of the more recent examples that could serve as good role models for others to follow when they have a crisis. Let's start with Rochelle Walensky, who heads the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and recently announced that she's going to be retiring from the position.
Mhm.
How has she done in that role?
Personally, having seen her and looking at the way that she communicates, what I love about her is when I look at her face, there is this sincerity that says, I believe what I am telling you. I'm not giving you some sort of approved version. This is the truth. And she really does. There is an honest, earnest sincerity for everything that she produces or says, I should say. And she backs it up with facts and figures, not just trust me, I know what I'm talking about. She tells you what's going on. And as I think, she has been a reassuring face for hundreds of thousands of people who have seen her on television in interviews and that, because, yeah, it feels comfortable. I believe what she's saying.
The old saying, of course, is that a picture is worth a thousand words. In her case, do you think a facial expression is worth more than a thousand words?
That truly is that's just that little boost that makes you go, oh, okay, good. That's what I was hoping was going to be happening. She said that. I believe it. And it truly is. It's in her face, in her eyes, that it's coming from her heart, not from a script sitting in front of her.
There are good examples around the world, of course. For example, Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky. How do you think he's been doing?
I give President Zelensky kudos from day one. He has his persona when we see him on television. He exudes confidence, but he's not trying to cover up anything. You don't feel like he's hiding the bad news, but he tells you straightforward, This is what I need. This is what's going on. And I love it in the early days when he literally out in Kyiv and he's out in the city square, not hiding back in his office or anything like that. He's out in public, reassuring his people and reassuring the world that he and Ukraine are going to pull through this. And he doesn't mince words. He's not afraid to tell other leaders around the world what he needs, why he needs it, and why they should support him. So he gets it at all levels.
Well, back in the U.S., what about Eric Adams, who's the mayor of New York City?
Mayor Adams, and I, with all due respect to him, I really haven't paid that much attention to him until recently when I've seen him on television talking about the migrant crisis and how they're getting busloads of migrants. And then when we had the subway incident. But I look at the face, I look at the eyes, and when I see him talking, it's again coming from his heart. He's saying, here's what's happening. I'm not happy about this. Here's why. And I truly believe that New Yorkers, and obviously I don't live in New York, so I can't speak for them, but I truly believe that when they hear him talking, they're going, there's a leader that I can turn to who, again, he's got our best interest at heart. It's in his eyes, it's in his face, it's in his expressions, it's in the words. Everything that he does and says is genuine, honest, and it's the fact.
Airlines, of course, provide a lot of fodder for examples. So Southwest Airlines come to mind, of course, and their CEO, Bob Jones. What's your take on how he's done with his company's various crisis situations?
Once again, I will give him credit. And I can think back to years ago when JetBlue had a similar difficulties. But what I liked about Bob Jones was just the same thing, is he was straightforward. We messed this up. We're going to fix it. Not, it's blame it on the weather, blame it on blah, 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 blah. No, it's our problem. We're going to deal with this. We're going to fix it. Now, we'll see when we get through this summer and travel periods and everything else, how well he does. But he wasn't, again, he was out front. He was out talking to the people, looking me straight in the eye and saying, yeah, my bad. We messed this up. We'll fix it. Now, having made that promise, I'm sitting here going, okay, Bob, we're going to be watching you for the next 2 or 3 months. Have you really fixed this? And we'll see. We don't know yet. But again, honest, straightforward. Here's the facts. Here's what we're going to do.
So, based on these good examples that we've just discussed, what's your advice for government officials and corporate executives on how to come across the best possible way for what they say and how they appear during a crisis?
This one thing, and we've got numerous examples to look at right now, but government leaders, with all due respect as always to them for what they're obviously in these positions because a majority of the public thought that they would be a good leader here, but they cannot come off as being antagonistic. They cannot be looked at as, I use the word scattershot. We're off on this subject right now. We're going to be off on this one tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. Be straightforward and don't offend major groups who have in the past, maybe reluctantly, but they still have supported you. Don't take these actions that will alienate them. And we've seen it here in Florida, is different rulings that have come down. We've removed certain books from school libraries because they don't tell the past like it should be told. I'm sorry, the past is the past. The past is history. The past happened. There's not a should be. It happened. Don't dive into that. And don't offend major voting groups of people. So, I'm not going to get into specific examples because I've got 850,000 that I could go into. But I need to see you as a leader taking actions that I intuitively know are good for me, hello, good for my family, good for my community, good for my state, good for my country. And so often they get wrapped up in this, oh, gee, how can I get the most people to watch me on television or whatever it may be? You don't do this by doing something that's going to make you look less qualified for your job.
You just mentioned Florida. That's a great segue, of course, for us to take a look at some of the recent situations that can serve as examples of what someone should not do or say during a crisis. Let's start with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. What's your take on him?
Thank goodness we have an election coming up, and hopefully enough people will come out and express their opinions. He's scrambling to get as many people on his side as he possibly can. Loved watching the debacle the other night with his introductory statements using Twitter for his platform, and manages to crash the system right off the get-go. That doesn't impress the audiences that are used to using social media today, traditional media. You try something, make sure it works before you try it. I was just talking the other day about an incident I had years and years and years ago, where I was doing an event outside of my workplace, and I didn't take the time to ask the people who were setting up all the equipment what was going to happen. And we wound up blocking off one complete lane of a very busy road. And it took it was Honolulu, and the Honolulu superintendent of police, it took him 5 minutes to call my boss, the president, and ask her, what are you people doing down there that you have blocked traffic? So, it's be prepared, think ahead, and take actions that will ingratiate people, not alienate people. And we can go into specifics here. We're having various issues with gay pride and that here in the area. One particular organization has canceled its pride parade because they say, and I'm not going to question this, that they're having some financial difficulties, but it comes on the heels of Governor DeSantis coming down with these draconian regulations forbidding different types of public activities. Hello? You've just managed once again to get an entire voting bloc to move against you. So I could probably go on way much longer than I should here, but that's my take on him. Is he's not being gubernatorial or presidential. He's being reactionary, and we don't need reactionary leaders.
What about the U.S. Supreme Court? They've been in the news a lot recently because of their response, or someone would say non-response to issues and questions about the ethics of members of the court. And John Roberts, of course, is regarded by many people as the face of the Supreme Court since he's the Chief Justice. How's he done in the wake of these different crisis situations?
Here again, I'm waiting for some definitive statements. I'm sorry, you're at the Supreme Court of the United States of America. You, in my mind and the minds of hundreds of thousands of people, you should represent the ultimate in ethical behavior. And we've had enough public examples of abuse of that particular item there. And Justice Roberts hasn't stepped forward to say, go back to use Bob Jones here. Okay, we messed up this. I don't mind if you tell me you messed up one time. Tell me how you're going to fix it. And he hasn't done that. And no, we don't presume that you are the ultimate in ethical behavior and that we assume you are. But show me that you have the guidelines. And I'll go off on just a quick side trip here. Is my lifetime has been public relations. We, for the Public Relations Society, for many organizations representing public relations professionals, we have a code of ethics that says this is how we will conduct ourselves. And it's very clear. Now, theoretically, we're honest people anyway. But I also have these guidelines that I can turn to anyone who questions what I'm doing and say, I'm doing this because of this, this, and this. And the Supreme Court needs the same thing. Doctors have it. Hello, a doctor is someone who saves lives. But they also have a code of ethics that says this is how we will conduct ourselves. Supreme Court needs to do that. Justice Roberts needs to take the lead on this, show us that he truly does believe in this, and make something happen.
So just don't say it. You got to do something to prove it. Is that right?
This is it. The proof is in the action, not in the words.
A member of the Supreme Court who serves, of course, with Chief Justice Roberts is Justice Clarence Thomas, and he's been in the news because of the gifts and favors he has been reported to have received over the years. What's your take on how he has been vocal or seen in this crisis?
This is a case, with all due respect again to him, is that we all make mistakes. So be clear on that. And this is expected. He's a human being. But I'm sorry, in this particular case, if it smells like a fish, if it wiggles like a fish, it's a fish. And you can't tell me, well, he was or is my good friend, so I'm perfectly okay taking tens of thousands of dollars worth of gifts, if you will, from my friend. No, you're not. Not in your position as a Supreme Court justice. Even if you were, like my stepfather was, a practicing attorney in a small country town in Georgia, it doesn't matter. The people who look to you, look at you, they expect you to be the ideal for that profession. And particularly when you are at the absolute top of that profession's pyramid, if you will. So, yeah, okay, I made a mistake. I am sorry. I did not think this through. I will not do this again. And I encourage you, the public, to watch me and keep track of me. But I will not do this again. We all make mistakes, period.
How
And
quickly, though, how easily do you think the public is when forgiving someone for what they did or what they said in a crisis?
it obviously whatever you say, excuse me, has to be backed up with action, visible actions. You can't just say, excuse me, you can't say, well, I'm going to do this. You do it. And you let them, you make it very, very clear. I will not do this ever again. Made a mistake, learn my lesson. But the public, the sad thing is, as we go through time, we get more and more examples of people in positions of responsibility and theoretically respect abusing their position. So the public, obviously, and when I was a kid, it was easier to get away with things because we didn't have the proliferation of media that we've got today that is going to spread your message. Just one last quick example here of when it really dawned on me how things had changed was 9/11. My wife is from Asia. She has friends all over the world. Within 15 minutes of the planes hitting the World Trade Center towers, she got a phone call from a friend in Australia. We were in Boston, Massachusetts. I just saw this on the news. How about our mutual friend who worked in Tower 2? Word traveled that fast. 15 minutes. Someone literally on the other side of the world in a completely different time zone has seen what happened and is questioning. In this case, for good reasons. But yeah, the public, this is being seen. And regardless of where we go, we're going to be questioned. I saw this about your president, your governor, your whatever it might be. What are you people doing about this? What's your people's problem? So it's there. The proliferation of platforms on which news, mostly bad, can be transmitted are growing exponentially. Get used to it.
Back overseas for a minute, in Great Britain, King Charles and the entire royal family has been in the public spotlight quite recently and over the last several decades. How have they done for what they say or do and their visibility in crisis situations?
It's it's right now. I think the King Charles is he's got a tough act to follow. This obviously, um, and he's got to do a lot of catch up. And I think he's trying to assure the people that he is as connected with them as his mother was. But the problem is he has some internal issues, also known as family problems, that he's got to deal with. And I'm not an expert on this one, so I absolutely am not going to suggest, Your Majesty, this is what you should be doing. But he's got to fix those problems first. Fix the family. Because people are looking at him and looking at that and going, if he can't even control his family, what can he do for our country, our nation? And that's, it's a worrisome thing. And we see this enough. I see comments so often on various platforms of someone in the UK making a comment, and it's not disparaging per se, but it's going, why can't he fix this? If he can't do that, what is he going to do for us? How can we look forward to a successful future if our leader can't even fix his internal problems?
Taking another look in the corporate world, McDonald's has had a series of crisis situations triggered by child labor laws. How has the CEO of McDonald's responded to that crisis?
My personal take on that one is, if I were giving him a grade in one of my classes, he would get a D-. I'm not hearing any kind of reassurances that things will truly be fixed. And the problem is, because we see this bubble up here, then it happens over there, then it happens down here. Once again, tell me what you are doing to fix this problem. And if it takes you, Mr. CEO, getting on your airplane and flying to every location in the world where you have a facility and having a heart-to-heart with the manager of that particular operation, do it. Because it's almost sort of, for me, it's obvious at this point in the game that they don't really have control of this. And, with all due respect to individual managers, is I know that they're doing their very, very best to succeed, but sometimes you need to be reminded, yes, I want you to succeed. Yes, I want you to make me proud of what you are doing, but don't take advantage of young people who don't know all the rules and regulations, don't understand what's going on. Stop doing it. And again, it has to come from the top. Do not do that again.
Kirk, we're almost out of time today, unfortunately. But before we close, what's the most important thing you'd like people to remember from your observations and recommendations?
For me, the most important thing is honesty, is being true to yourself, being true to your mission, and being true to those who turn to or look to you for support and guidance. Don't have excuses. Don't say, oh, well, I couldn't do this because. Once again, go back to Southwest Airlines or JetBlue back in the day, we messed up. We won't do that again. We will fix this. And I, the leader, take full responsibility for this. That's what I think there again, it's just that. Let me see that you truly, truly in your heart believe what you are telling me you're going to be doing.
Well, thanks again for joining me today on Crisis Ahead, Kirk.
Thank you so much for having me, Edward. I really appreciate it.
That's it for this edition of Crisis Ahead. My guest today was Kirk Hazlett, an adjunct professor of communication at the University of Tampa. Be sure to come back next week for more advice and insights on preparing for, managing, and recovering from a crisis. Or subscribe to Crisis Ahead wherever you get podcasts. Each week I interview government officials, corporate executives, and experts who share their advice and insights about a variety of crisis management and crisis communications related topics. Recent guests have included Jay Johnson, who's the former Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Isabella Guzman, the Administrator of the Small Business Administration, and officials of the Department of Defense and the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Future shows will focus on topics including product recalls, a Crisis Management Hall of Fame and Hall of Shame, and crisis management lessons to be learned from HBO's Succession. And be sure to read my articles about crisis-related issues, news, and topics on Forbes.com, where I'm a leadership strategy senior contributor. To learn more, visit my website at publicrelations.com. Remember, it's not a matter of if a crisis will hit your organization or company, it's when. And the sooner you're prepared for it, the better.
Produced by Heartcast Media.